Um, Americans as a whole produce over 21 tons of CO2 emissions in a given year, and that's not even counting the other greenhouse gases like water vapor and methane, which methane comes from animal fecal matter. Um, this affects everyone on the earth because we all live here, and if we continue using carbon at the rate we are now, we will cause another global extinction because there's been 5 global extinctions in this Earth in total so far, and each one of them had a spike in CO2, and this spike has been the largest this Earth has ever seen. Global warming is defined as a gradual increase in average temperature of the Earth, and carbon sinks are defined as an environment, man-made or a natural place that can absorb carbon, like forests and oceans or reservoirs. Global warming is happening because of rising ocean temperatures and deforestation because these are the Earth's biggest carbon sinks. There are too much carbon. There's too much carbon for the sinks to take in right now. This is because of the Industrial Revolution. Because now carbon sinks keep up with the amount of carbon being produced. Can't keep up with the amount of carbon being produced. I will be telling everyone about how oceans and forests affect global warming. I will be explaining and I'll be extending the carbon cycle. Um, Oceans and forests affect global warming in a big way. Number one, oceans are warming at an unbelievably fast rate now. A good example is a good example and reasoning for this is coral bleaching is good evidence for this. This is because when the oceans are warming, ocean warms, it can result in organisms that live on the coral, which is called zooxanthellae, um, which keep the coral alive because the zooxanthellae eat and then provide the coral with food. And if the ocean rises 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, the zooxanthellae will expel the coral will expel the zooxanthellae off the coral, and so the coral will die. This and then also the oceans are the biggest carbon sink right now, um, absorbing more than 50% of the carbon that goes into the atmosphere. Um, Carbon dioxide heats up the earth, and carbon sinks help absorb the CO2 and keep the earth at a reasonable temperature. Not really making the earth's temperature not fluctuate as high or low. Um, but we've been using CO2 and other greenhouse gases so much that the oceans can't keep up. So the problem with that is the carbon fills up the ocean because the oceans have a limit. Each sink has a limit, and then the plankton also act like a mini sink in the ocean because the plankton needs CO2 to survive, specifically the green plankton because of the photosynthesis that happens, which means the sun it takes energy from the sun and other greenhouse gases and converts the CO2 to oxygen, but even that has its limits. It can't like take in all the CO2 that we're producing at once and do that because we're producing extreme amounts. Um, it's the and the plankton can create a biological pump in the atmosphere, in the earth. I mean, because when the plankton dies, it traps it. The plankton gets trapped at the seafloor because the plankton will get dropped down to the seafloor. And then another huge major carbon sink right now is forests. Forests can be underrated for carbon sinks, but they really shouldn't be. Forests, when they're healthy, all the forests combined when they're healthy, can absorb about 25% of all carbon out of the greenhouse gases in this world. But because of the fires that recently struck, especially the state of California, it's not taking as much carbon in because it's taking all the carbon in from the fires, which are making the fires bigger because carbon feeds fires, and it's like a positive feedback loop, and then but because the forests aren't able to take as much anymore, the grasslands could save the day. Unlike trees, the grass store the carbon in the roots instead of the leaves. So when they burn, the carbon is still trapped in the ground. But this has been a problem in California because of the drought. And the drought's been killing these grasslands because there's been not enough water. So the grass ends up dying, and which means the roots end up getting rerooted for farming, which releases all the carbon out. And plants also control CO2 emissions by helping by converting into oxygen. They take with the process photosynthesis, which I explained. It's the same process that I explained what the plankton do, except they don't die and go back to the bottom of the ocean because they're on land. And then lastly, I'll be explaining the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle is a very simple on how it works, but it can easily be destroyed because too much carbon. So this is how the carbon cycle works. There's about 4 steps. The first step is the carbon and other greenhouse gases like methane, nitrogen oxide, and water vapor, and of course CO2, is produced by either the animals, factories, cars, or natural disasters like fires. Then the carbon goes into the atmosphere. When it gets in the atmosphere, it tries to escape the atmosphere, but it's greenhouse gases, so greenhouse gases are the only gases that can't escape the atmosphere because they're too dense. So they get trapped in the atmosphere. Of course, some of it escapes, but most of it gets trapped in the atmosphere. And then after the greenhouse gases get trapped in the atmosphere, they get absorbed by the carbon sinks, mainly forests, oceans, grasslands, and sediment. The carbon gets trapped, and carbon also gets trapped in forests and the plankton, like I said before. And when it gets trapped in those, it goes through the process and gets turned to oxygen, like I said. That's the third step, and that's the second and third step. The final step is the carbon cycle starts again with the excess carbon getting released into the atmosphere, and then it's starting again. But when it gets released into the atmosphere, it's compounded with all the new carbon that just joined the cycle too. So like it's the carbon cycle is a big positive feedback loop in the way that when it gets affected first, it keeps on getting affected and then it keeps on building. So the carbon cycle works, but to a certain degree. Um, we need the carbon cycle to run smoothly because without it the cycle will be broken and the CO2 will be able to go wherever it wants and heat up the earth to a degree that we can't survive. Um, in our lifetimes, the world as we know it is going to be very different because the earth will be so warm that there will be no coral or the basis for life for the ocean. The earth will be on fire because all of the excess CO2 and greenhouse gases. So it's not too late to do your part. So get out there and I'm not saying start breathing because that you need breath, but use less CO2, like drive less. If you need to go to work, then go to work. But you know what I mean. Okay, so that was all. Have a great day, guys.